Back to the Hill. Important bills await action from a lame duck Congress. Tensions downplayed. The U.S. and China agree on climate change, military cooperation, and trade. Papal audience. Pope Francis visits with the world at his weekly gathering in St. Peter's Square. And painting a saint. An artist famous for papal portraits paints Blessed Mother Assunta Marchetti. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, November 12th, 2014. Good evening from Washington. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. President Obama continues his trip to Asia, and the Asia-Pacific trip now includes a significant pollution controlling agreement with China. Our chief White House correspondent Susanne LaFrankie reports. Suzanne?
Good evening, Brian. Now, this groundbreaking agreement between the United States and China may be a signal that the world's two worst polluters are becoming serious about controlling emissions. While the Democrats are calling it landmark public policy, the Republicans say it's nothing more than a hollow jobs killer.
The second leg of the Asia-Pacific trip had the president attending a gala dinner at the conference hall with Myanmar's president. But the news overnight has come from the president's time in China, where a surprise climate pact was announced, an agreement that was the focus of months-long secret negotiations. The president said the two world powers have an obligation to act.
As the world's two largest economies, energy consumers, and emitters of greenhouse gases, we have a special responsibility to lead the global effort against climate change.
The pact came as a pleasant surprise to environmentalists.
It's a game changer, and it will set off a set of dominoes. The U.S. and China are half of global emissions. Now we need the other half.
Under the agreement, Obama set a goal to cut U.S. emissions between 26 to 28% by 2025. In China, pollution is a major problem and continues to escalate as it builds new coal plants. The Chinese have agreed to set a target for their emissions to peak by 2030, a concession so the Chinese economy doesn't falter while working towards those goals. In Washington, Republicans fresh off their sweep in the midterms that gave them control of both houses are not happy with the accord.
I read the agreement requires the Chinese to do nothing at all for 16 years, while these carbon emission regulations are creating havoc in my state and other states around the country.
Now, the agreement does not require congressional approval. However, Republicans are quick to point out that they could act to undo some of the president's authority. Back to you, Brian.
All right, thank you, Suzanne. And Lonnie Ellis is the Associate Director of Catholic Climate Covenant, a group promoting Catholic teaching on environmental stewardship, and a third-order Franciscan, I might add. What's your assessment of this climate deal?
Yeah, well, we have the two largest emitters coming together and making a positive step like this. I think it starts to meet our moral obligation to our sisters and brothers around the world. When these two countries have been the main blockers of any kind of international agreements.
Is there enough substance to it, though?
You know, I think symbolically it is a huge step that can then boost our international talks that are happening, coming up in Lima and Paris, and I think it actually has a lot of substance for that power right there.
What else, though, would you like to see in this agreement, something that, you know, is a little more tangible?
Well, I think, you know, there are so many struggles even to getting anything through the U.S. right now that I don't think there was anything more that really could have been said or done in terms of an agreement that either of these countries probably could make, but especially our own, when even for us to make the step of the first ever limits on carbon pollution from power plants are under such heavy attack. Something that the U.S. bishops have said, you know, let's go ahead and put some limits on carbon pollution, first ever limits on carbon pollution. And, you know, even that is being very difficult for us to accomplish here.
Let's talk briefly about the Catholic teaching about the environment. There's a lot of confusion about it.
Right. I mean, I think there's not so much confusion from the church, right? I mean, going back decades now, the past three popes have been very clear about environmental degradation and how it hurts the poor, and naming climate change in specific. I think the confusion really comes from our national leaders, who there's kind of a junk drawer list of excuses for why we shouldn't take action. You know, we don't believe the scientists, or, anything that would happen, China and other emitters would just kind of negate anything we could do. I think the confusion is really from our own national leaders. We don't know where to look if our elected leaders are talking like this.
But the church is very clear that the earth, the planet, is God's creation, and
Absolutely.
we're to be stewards of that, right?
Absolutely. The earth is the Lord's and all that it holds, from Psalms. It's a beautiful way of spiritually looking after all of creation when we look at it that way. But I think we often think the environment's out there. And that's why I actually think we should talk about climate change as a human issue much more than we are, right? It's about our sisters and brothers around the world.
It would probably reach more people.
Absolutely.
If you approached it that way versus more science.
Absolutely.
That a lot of us don't even understand. Why do you think there is so much resistance to this theory of global warming, climate change?
Yeah. Again, if our national leaders are saying we don't believe the science, or this is going to kill all kinds of jobs for us, without kind of talking anything about a moral obligation to future generations or to our brothers and sisters, I think that's going to be very confusing for us, and I think it's hard. So I'm a lay Franciscan, and so I've made a commitment to live simply, but I do that with a group. There's a group of us who do that and inspire one another. And if our national conversation is, no, you don't have to, don't worry about that. Don't worry about those people in Africa suffering from famine. If we're not in this together, it's very hard for us to move forward.
All right, well, we appreciate your insight from Catholic Climate Covenant. Lonnie Ellis, thanks for being with us.
Thanks a lot.
Some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. Tonight we're learning more about how a pilot survived the Virgin Galactic spaceship disaster. The investigation is still going on, but the National Transportation Safety Board says the pilot was thrown clear as the spaceship broke up over the Mojave Desert last month. Peter Siebold told investigators he unbuckled from his seat before a parachute automatically deployed. Investigators are looking into whether a unique braking system contributed to the disaster that killed the co-pilot. Virgin was testing the Galactic, hoping for a launch of space tourism fleet as early as next year. The Supreme Court today debated race as a possible factor in the drawing of political districts in Alabama. The state maintains it had to concentrate black voters in some districts. The effect, neighboring districts had more white voters who are apt to vote Republican. African Americans challenging the Republican-drawn maps argue that black voters should have been dispersed, increasing their influence. A decision in this case is expected by late June. The family of the only Ebola patient to die in the U.S. has reached a legal settlement with the hospital. A lawyer representing Thomas Eric Duncan's family says that hospital admits to mistakenly releasing him early, and he hopes it will spark legal change.
So that emergency room patients who are mistreated and sent home when they should not be sent home and not given the proper care don't have to prove gross negligence or willful and wanton conduct.
That hospital, by the way, was in Dallas, Texas, and the lawyer says some of the settlement money will fund the creation of a foundation to help other Ebola victims. 3 American sailors are harassed and roughed up while on shore leave in Turkey, a U.S. ally. This happened today in Istanbul, and the video shows a small mob yelling at the sailors, throwing paint at them, and then covering their heads with bags. The sailors weren't hurt. They safely returned to their ship after the incident. A local news agency says 12 people have been arrested. They're believed to be part of a nationalist youth group. Turkey is a NATO member and a Middle Eastern ally of the United States. Pope Francis expresses solidarity with the families of 43 Mexican students who have disappeared and may have been killed. Police say a drug gang confessed to killing them late last month and burning their bodies. But supporters of the missing students refuse to believe they are dead. They're continuing protests that have blocked major highways and set government buildings ablaze. In recent weeks, at his Wednesday audience, the Pope said this makes the dramatic reality that exists between the sales and trafficking of drugs visible. Francis also urged bishops, priests, and deacons to be humble, recognizing that their ministry is an unmerited gift of God's mercy. The U.S. bishops are voting on liturgical proposals and leadership positions at their fall assembly going on in Baltimore. They've elected Archbishop Gregory Amond of New Orleans as the new USCCB secretary. The bishops are also moving forward with the canonization cause for Father Paul Watson, New York Cardinal Timothy Dolan leads that effort for the priest from his archdiocese. Father Watson was an Episcopalian before converting to Catholicism. He founded the Society of the Atonement. Another concern for the bishops, how to improve the church's messaging. They commissioned a study looking at how people's brains receive information, hoping to share the gospel more effectively.
What is the language we use that can touch the hearts of people? Because sometimes the message remains true, but the language needs to be something that will really touch the hearts and people will understand.
The bishops' meeting continues through Thursday in Baltimore, but the sessions today and tomorrow are closed to the media. The bishops are keenly aware that effective use of the media is the key in the new evangelization. Some attended a debut screening of the series AD about the Acts of the Apostles. It's based directly on Scripture, and creators Mark Burnett and Roma Downey are asking the bishops to help promote it. It's being billed as a tool to fire up public interest in the Bible.
We feel it's a great opportunity in the new evangelization to bring these great epic stories to life on network TV on a Sunday night after church, and have family and friends come together and actually strike up a conversation about these amazing stories where ordinary people were inspired by the Holy Spirit to do extraordinary things.
There are curriculums and study guides with scripture references tied to these episodes. They'll be available online at shareadtheseries.com. AD premieres Easter Sunday on NBC. Coming up, can student interaction help thaw the sometimes frosty relationship between the U.S. and China? And anticipating the Acts of the Apostles making its mainstream network TV debut. Thanks for joining us on Wednesday, November 12th. I'm Brian Patrick, and after nearly 2 months of a break for midterm elections, Congress is back in session tonight. The question, what will the House and Senate accomplish during this lame duck session? Jason Calvi has more from Capitol Hill tonight. Jason?
Brian, Ebola and fighting ISIS were the topics of Senate hearings today. President Obama is asking Congress for $6.2 billion to fight Ebola, and today senators took up that request. The Senate Appropriations Committee questioned top Obama officials, including the secretaries of both the Departments of Health and Human Services and Homeland Security. Also appearing before the committee, doctors from the Centers for Disease Control and the National Institutes of Health, along with state and Defense Department officials.
The funding will allow the department to enhance our ongoing preparedness here in the United States and our efforts to ensure that states and localities are prepared. For example, it will be about the purchase of PPE, that personal protective equipment, training of thousands of healthcare workers.
Also today, incoming representatives checked in for their freshman orientation. The new kids on the block will be learning about ethics and House floor rules, and even how to hire staffers. They'll also find out what their committee assignments are and where their offices will be. The newly elected Republican senators-elect met with leader Mitch McConnell today. They were still smiling more than a week since their elections.
How does it feel to be here?
Great. Been a pretty good week.
And even more good news for Republicans today. Dan Sullivan has officially defeated the Democratic incumbent in Alaska. That adds one more Senate seat for the GOP. The Alaska race was too close to call on election night. And behind closed doors tonight, Obama's man on ISIS, retired General John Allen, will be taking questions with the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Now, tomorrow at the House, both Ebola and ISIS, the Islamic State, will be topics of hearings over there. Brian?
All right, Jason, on Capitol Hill, and there's still a Senate race that's yet to be decided. That's in Louisiana. Republican Bill Cassidy and incumbent Democrat Mary Landrieu will face off in a runoff next month. Landrieu has repeatedly touted the importance of her seat on the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee. Of course, that state has a robust oil and gas industry. But now, incoming Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says he'll appoint Cassidy to that committee if he's elected December 6th. That potentially undercuts one of Landrieu's main arguments for re-election. Freezing temperatures are expected to hit the south and east by this weekend. Snow and sub-zero temperatures have already invaded places like Colorado and Wyoming. This sudden chill is courtesy of a super typhoon Nuri in the North Pacific. It's pulling Arctic winds from Alaska and Canada, pushing them far south. The early taste of winter is forecast to continue into next week. 2 window washers in New York City got a real scare today, dangling 69 stories high on the New World Trade Center tower. Firefighters had to cut a hole through a double pane glass window to rescue them. Apparently, a scaffold cable snapped, leaving the window washers hanging, literally. They were probably shaken up a bit, but thankfully they were not hurt. Maryland's largest school district votes to strip religious labels from holidays on next year's school calendar. This move after Muslim leaders in the community asked for equal recognition of a Muslim holy day. Wyatt Goolsby is here now with that story.
Brian, several religious leaders from Maryland are voicing their concern about stripping all religious terms from public schools. The Montgomery County Board of Education voted to get rid of religious labels in their meeting yesterday afternoon. The school will still be closed for Christian and Jewish holidays like Christmas and Yom Kippur, but they will not be referred to by their holidays. Muslim leaders asked for their Muslim holy day, Eid al-Adha, to be added to the calendar. Both Muslim and other religious groups say they did not want religious labels removed from holidays, but board members say it is a just solution.
It seems like somebody's bending over backwards really, really hard to try and not give equality to the Muslim community.
I'm saddened by the idea that anyone would think that by trying to be equitable for all, that I would not be appreciative of any one group's faith.
Montgomery County schools are not the first to eliminate all religious holiday terms. Fairfax County schools in Virginia already have removed those holidays from their calendar. Members of the Beckett Fund for Religious Liberty here in Washington tell us this is part of a bigger conversation about the role of religious terms in the public sphere. Asma Udine, a legal advisor, tells me there are a variety of challenges to people trying to express their faith.
I think that there is this feeling of religion being as a source of not wanting to prefer certain religions over others, and so there's like a fear in the interest of diversity to not discriminate.
As a Muslim, Udine also tells me she personally thinks the school board's decision is troubling because it makes the Muslim community look like a scapegoat, something the school board did not intend. She also says there are positive aspects of religion in the public square that people forget. Only one board member in Montgomery County voted against stripping the religious holidays, making the vote 7-1. We should mention the Beckett Fund also represents EWTN in an ongoing legal case related to the health care mandate. Brian?
All right, thank you, Wyatt. Cybersecurity, human rights, and climate change, areas where China and the U.S. don't always see eye to eye. But Catherine Zeltner reports on a program of diplomacy for Chinese and American teenagers.
The morning school rush in Beijing. Except this school is packed with teens from across America. Juniors and seniors spending a full year abroad in China. Arlington, Virginia native Anthony Box is here to master Mandarin, Chinese history, and even music. Both the U.S. and China hope that human interaction and understanding can help their sometimes frosty relationship. And at 17, Anthony already gets it.
We're the newer generation, so when we get older, we're going to have to deal with like all these problems and stuff. And so it'd be really great for us to experience the world so we know what we have to deal with.
Anthony says he learns more outside of the classroom, where he commutes just like any Beijinger. He lives with a Chinese family and calls his Chinese host mother Mom. Before joining the School Year Abroad program, Wang Zhang had never spent much time with Americans. Now she's hosted 3. This is close, personal interaction, she says. These boys have become like my own children. Anthony's life will be all about China for a year. He hopes to carry the lessons he learns for a lifetime. Catherine Zeltner, EWTN News Nightly.
Up next, a papal portrait painter takes her gift in a new direction with a portrait of a new Brazilian blessing. And a successful landing on a speeding comet caps a 10-year, $4 billion space odyssey. On this Wednesday, the 12th of November, we celebrate the feast of St. Josaphat, who promoted unity between Catholic and Orthodox groups. He died on this day in 1623. Thank you for joining us for our Wednesday edition of EWTN News Nightly. I'm Brian Patrick. An artist known for her portraits of St. John Paul II has her latest creation blessed by Pope Francis today. Natalia Sarkova presented the painting of a new blessed from Brazil, Mother Assunta, to the Holy Father. She was commissioned by the Scalabridian Order to paint the official portrait of their foundress for her beatification ceremony in October. Before today's audience, the artist told EWTN News Nightly she gave Blessed Assunta a smile that people remember when she served the poor.
When I went to Brazil for the beatification and all the sisters thanked me, they told me that finally Mother Assunta is smiling. You've made Mother Assunta smile.
Sarkova painted the portrait in her Rome studio. Her subject, Mother Assunta, helped orphans and immigrants in Sao Paulo, Brazil. She died in 1948. Well, this story reads like science fiction, but it's real. A spacecraft lands on a speeding comet hundreds of millions of miles from Earth. The European Space Agency says it has succeeded in landing a spacecraft on the comet for the first time in history. This landing caps a 10-year, 4 billion-mile journey by the European Space Agency's Rosetta spacecraft.
Okay, so we are there, and Phila is talking to us. First things he told us was that the harpoons have been fired, rewound, and the landing gear has been moved inside, so we are sitting on the surface. Phila is talking to us, more data to come.
So today's landing on the speeding comet is the highlight of a mission to study comets and learn more about the origins of these celestial bodies and perhaps the entire universe. So it went billions of miles because I'm told it had to slingshot twice around the Earth and once around Mars to gain the speed that was necessary to catch up with the comet. It's been following the comet since August, and today actually landed on the comet. The scientists still don't know what condition that landing module is in right now, but they should be letting us know when they do. That's it for tonight. Until tomorrow, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. If you want to watch again this episode or any other episode of EWTN News Nightly, you can go to EWTN's YouTube page. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, I'm Brian Patrick. We leave you tonight with a few special moments from today's general audience with Pope Francis in St. Peter's Square. Good night, and may God bless you.